tireless advocacy on behalf of the lowest income tenants all across the country, and excited to work with him and this caucus to champion those needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yay.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is an opportunity before us for us to declare that housing, in spite of the fact that all of the emphasis in Washington seems to be on demolishing the spirit of people who need housing, we believe that housing expresses an individual's somebodyness if they are able to own their own home, and that's exactly why we are trying to make this issue where it should be, which is at the top of the agenda on Washington, D.C. I would like to thank the caucus partners, including the National Low-Income Housing Coalition, the Public Housing Authority Directors Association, the Council of Large Public Housing Authorities, the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials, and so many, many others. The unique characteristic of this Congressional Caucus is that all of its members at one time or another lived in public housing. In fact, most of us grew up in public housing. My mother, father, 3 sisters, and I lived 7 years in public housing. I grew up about 30 minutes from downtown Dallas, Texas. I had a wonderful family. My father had to lie and worked on 3 jobs to put enough money aside so we could move out of public housing. And so when people are disparaging people who live in public housing, it's very difficult for me not want to do Muhammad Ali, because I think my dad gave everything he had to raise 4 children out of public housing, and all 4 of them graduated from college, 2 with doctorates. And so I am not at all somebody who believes that if you live in public housing, there's something necessarily wrong with you. In fact, we need more public housing so that people can graduate financially into affordable housing. Now, the residents of low-income neighborhoods are human beings, and I've never, ever heard of somebody who said, man, I can't wait till I go and move into public housing. And yet, if you go to a hearing here, you would hear people imply that people are fighting to get into public housing and they're working to get out. Low income does not mean low value.
Truth.
And it doesn't mean low potential. It's important that this caucus be founded by members of Congress who grew up in public housing to help break the stigma used to attack public housing programs. We are public housing. We are public housing. And I want to tell you something quickly before the speakers come up. At a time when we need more housing and we need to have laws that push for fair housing, I'm here to tell you that there's just been an attack on fair housing at a time when we need more housing. And so in the United States of America, we're getting very close to a time when discrimination is following the law. And that's what's so sad about this. My father died a year ago, a year and 4 weeks ago, at 101. I am, in some ways, pleased that he never saw the day come when people who struggled and worked and did everything you're supposed to do in America are put down, and that the government is not going to try to make getting a house fair in the United States of America. And this is a sick moment in the history of our country. HUD is on attack, is a part of the attack coming from not the poorhouse, but the White House. And if we are not willing to stand up as we are, there will be no opposition. And we've got to make sure that our grandchildren will know that during this moment when democracy was in trouble, and every democracy seems to want to commit suicide, but in this moment, there were people who stood up and said, no, stop in the name of fairness, stop in the name of democracy, stop in the name of fairness.
Stop.
That's why we're here. Thank you very kindly.
Thank you, Representative Cleaver. Thank you so much. So we'll next hear from Representative Stephen Lynch. Stephen Lynch is also a co-chair of the Congressional Public Housing Caucus, representing Massachusetts' 8th District, which includes parts of Boston and southern suburbs. Mr. Lynch has firsthand experience of public housing and as a member of the Critical House Financial Services Committee. Representative Lynch.
Oh, thank you very much. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor for me to be here with my co-chairs. You've heard from Reverend Cleaver, Greg Meeks, Ritchie Torres will be here as well. My story, I grew up in the old colony housing projects in South Boston. It was a tough neighborhood. My mom and dad talked for years. We lived there for 15 years. I got 5 sisters, and my 5 sisters and I and my mom and dad lived there for 15 years. And they always talked about how tough a neighborhood it was and how they wanted to get me out of there. And then 15 years later, they bought the house across the street. So we stayed right there. Look, public housing is a community as much as any other neighborhood. And, I just consider myself blessed that we had that opportunity. My family went through some tough times early on. The economy was bad. There were times when my dad used to say that there were times in our family where we had to save up to be poor. And, if we had not had the blessing of public housing, I don't know where my family would have been with all those kids and in that tough situation. So every opportunity I get to give back, we just redid those housing projects. When I was a young attorney, I was representing families in the projects that had lead paint on the windows. They had asbestos on the pipes. We just redid those recently. And Mayor Walsh, Marty Walsh, later became Secretary of Labor, named that housing development after my mom. It's now the Ann Lynch Homes at Old Colony, So I'm all in. I'm all in on this. And I couldn't have better partners than my colleagues, my co-chairs here on this effort. And as Reverend Cleaver said, this is a time of great consequence for public housing all across this country, and we need to step up. We need to step up and make sure that people understand. The president and Elon Musk are cutting programs left and right, and I don't think people fully appreciate the impact that it's going to have on people who rely on those services. And in this case, eliminating 50% of the personnel at HUD, I don't think they understand the impact that will have not only on the people behind me and the people who are deeply advocating on behalf of public housing, but for generations to come. So I'm honored to serve as a co-chair of the Congressional Public Housing Caucus. This caucus, as the Reverend has said, will serve as a much-needed voice to advocate on behalf of the expansion of affordable public housing across the country. In the midst of escalating housing costs, I mean, dear Lord, in Boston we just did a study where the average home there cost about $911,000. That is just ridiculous. So not only are we allowing affordable public housing to decay and refusing to reinvest, and I'm talking about my Republican colleagues, of course, but that dream is getting further and further out of reach for most of the families that live in that city or in that town or in that neighborhood. So I just welcome this opportunity to work with my colleagues. You know, we've got a job to do here that will require all of us together. People who have been involved in public housing realize what it takes to create and maintain public housing. You got to be sort of a magician lately. You know, there's probably, in any given public housing development, there's probably 15 different funding streams that we have to cobble together to make things work.
Fact.
So it's the time now to make sure that government, and HUD especially, HUD is the clearinghouse to bring all those parties together, all those groups together, to provide us direction and guidance and resources to make new public housing happen, and also to repurpose and re-energize the existing public housing that we have. So I'm delighted that the good Reverend put us together here. I feel the hand of God at work, and I hope we live up to the expectation of all the people in public housing who are relying on us today. Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you so much, Representative Lynch. And thank you for sharing your story as well. So we'll next hear from Representative Gregory Meeks. Representative Meeks represents New York's 5th District, which includes Southeast Queens. He is a co-chair of the Congressional Public Housing Caucus and one of our members that was a public housing resident himself. Welcome.
Let me thank you and thank everyone for being here at this critical time in America's history. The camera of history is rolling. It's rolling on us right now. Because the question is, who are we? Have we lost our very soul? When I grew up as a young person, it was to lift someone up. We were proud as Americans to say that we were going to make sure that we were including people. We passed laws that included folks that were not included in laws in the past. And now we hear folks with glee say, let's go back to a different time. That's not who we are. That's not who I believe the overwhelming number of American people are. When we look at America, we think of individuals in government who care for all of its people, not just a few. And if you look at where we are now, the individuals that are running the White House, you saw them at the inauguration. Not a one of them ever have known how to live as an ordinary American citizen. Not a one of them. They always and all come from a privileged background. And sometimes you have individuals who come from privileged backgrounds but don't look down upon someone who doesn't, who wants to give them a hand up so that they know that they can do and be whoever they want to be also. I live by the creed of what my mother taught me. She says, never forget who you are. Never forget where you came from. And never forget the people that helped you succeed. So, I'm a little poor boy from New York City who grew up in public housing. Till I was out of college, we lived in public housing. I can tell you what public housing provided for me. It provided me an opportunity to see a better America. It provided me an opportunity because my family had a roof over my head, even though my father didn't have much money. They came from the South to New York looking for better opportunities. It afforded them the opportunity to make sure that they could invest in their kids so that they can then move on and have more than what they had. Public housing for me meant a little league coach who lived in public housing, who took kids around and made sure that we played Little League baseball. Would not have had the opportunity, actually, to live or to play baseball to understand that, but for the fact that my parents had no money, public housing helped. That is something that I'm sure that Mr. Musk and Mr. Trump would love to cut. Would make sure that would not happen. Make sure, it meant for me to see people who cared, who had not much money, but had a tenant association that brought people together to make sure that they were working on behalf of the rest of the people in the building so that they could have a better life.
Yes.
It's talking about having a better life, coming together. It gave me with friends, all who grew up in public housing. Here I am, now as a member of the United States Congress. I dare say I might not be here, but for the fact that I was raised in public housing. And it gives me the better opportunity to look around and say we can make a better America if we united and make sure that we were preserving and creating more public housing for people to live in. We say we care about children, but when it comes to the most basic services that they need, we take it away. And these proposed cuts that this administration is looking to administer, as we've seen them do, let me just tell you, when I look at what they've done with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they're supposed to help the average everyday person, it tells me that I better have big concerns about the immediate future, because they will say that the government should not be doing anything to help public housing, that it should be all what they look at is private housing, and they want to run a government in a way that many of them run businesses, in that they take the small person, fire them, get rid of them to see how much more profit that they can make. No, that's not what government was created for. Government is supposed to be of the people, by the people, and for the people. These are average, everyday Americans, hardworking, and they're coming after HUD next. And when they come after HUD, that means they're coming after the residents that live in public housing. It's preventing individuals from being able to move and get an opportunity to own a home. Look, my friends in public housing, one of them is a big-time artist now. Another one of them is a pharmacist. Another one of them was in the Secret Service. Another one of them was, or is, I should say, a police officer. Another one of them, these are all people that grew up in public housing, who we are still friendly with, I'm still friends with today. And we still go back into those same places of which we come from, so that another young child can look up and see, I too can achieve in America. And someone does care about me. And someone will make sure to give me a hand up. That's what this fight is all about right now. Because if we don't think about that, then they have no tomorrow. Because there will be no affordable housing and opportunities to get a loan from a bank to buy a house when you do have that opportunity, because of what this administration is doing. So I just want to thank all the people that are out here, because this is a cause for human rights. This is a cause to make sure that all people have a roof over their head, but an opportunity to look up and say, I can accomplish and I will accomplish. This is about a struggle of who we are as a nation in 2025. Who are we? Are we people who are compassionate and care about all human beings? Or are we only caring about a huge tax cut for the very richest individuals in the United States of America? Who are we? This is a question not just for urban America. This is a question for rural America. This is a question for middle America. This is a question for the East Coast and the West Coast, and it should rally all of us together so that the voices of the people are one to say to that administration, no, we're not going to sit back and allow you to take us back to a time where you didn't care about the poor. You didn't care about those that needed that hand up, because that's what made America, America, that we all were able to participate in it. So thank you all for being here. This is a struggle that doesn't end. The vision of Mr. Cleaver, along with my brother Lynch and brother Torres, and I see my colleagues that are now here on the Financial Services Committee also. But I want to thank brother Cleaver especially because as chair of the Housing Committee, this is his vision, this is his work, this is his dedication. You know, he could have gone and taken and said, I got my education, now I'm going to just worry about myself. But no, he's making sure he takes care of all of God's children. Thank you, Reverend Cleaver. Thank you for being the stalwart. Thank you for bringing us together and bringing this caucus together so that we can stand and make sure that history shows that we're on the right side of it. Thank you all.
Yes. Definitely well done. Thank you. Thank you, Representative Meeks. So next, we're going to hear from Representative Ritchie Torres. Representative Tlaib represents Michigan's 12th district, including parts of Detroit and the surrounding suburbs. She is also on the House Subcommittee. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for Reverend Cleaver for always being rooted in his community. I can tell you I've seen him in action where he carries a photo of the home that his family lived in and shows it to all of our colleagues, including our Republican colleagues. It's a very powerful message in bringing his lived experiences and bringing the people that he's here to represent and fight for. And I really, really respect him so much for his continuation and commitment to housing for all. We all know housing is a human right. I'm here to always remind people that when I come here, I bring my district with me. And I got to remember the Williams family. Many of you may have heard about a mother of 5 who couldn't find housing, kept calling more than 3 times to get some support after she was evicted. She lost 2 of her children, her son who made her a mother, 9-year-old son, and her 2-year-old little baby froze to death in a car as they waited for that call back to find some sort of housing. You know, this is an institution that continues to always find money for bombs and for war, but we can't seem to find $11 billion to $12 billion to end homelessness in our country. And that says what our priorities must be is to be able to take care of families like the Williams family. You know, when she was evicted, many people told her to call this number and that number. And it just reminds me of something, you know, coming from the most beautiful, blackest city in the country, been taught to speak truth to power. You know, the private market has never supplied everyone with safe, sanitary, affordable housing. Remember that. The private market cannot supply affordable housing to the lowest income families because what those families can afford to pay doesn't cover development and operation costs of the development phase. So this is why public housing is so important. This is why this caucus is so important. Subsidies in public housing are absolutely necessary for the most vulnerable. Unfortunately, from early history, we know that Congress has undermined public housing. We heard from the Alliance, the Housing Alliance today, anything with equity within HUD is being eliminated. So we know that, again, all the work that we've been trying to do to cap construction costs, thereby limiting quality materials and raising maintenance costs, all of that is impacting the housing crisis that many of our families are struggling again with. I want you all to know, you know, as we continue to fight, not only in creating this caucus, but working on Justice for All Civil Rights Act, pushing against discriminatory practices that continue to be really relevant for many of our families. Women that have children pregnant cannot find housing because they're being discriminated against. Remember that. It's about a number of these issues that continue to be challenging for many of our families. I know for us in the Detroit Housing Commission, for instance, we need $12 million annually, y'all, to spend on improvements. $12 million annually. I mean, all of us, many people we know that maintenance is so important. Again, I've seen it where in my Inkster public housing, I saw families being able to, again, be exposed to lead, be exposed to so many of these contaminants, their children getting sick because we haven't been able to keep up with the cost of maintaining some of our public housing. So this public housing caucus is incredibly important as we try to bring these voices and, again, the most vulnerable. You know, I turn around and I see, you know, evict Elon. You know, one of the things that Reverend talked about is the lack of lived experiences that we have in many of these people making decisions. You know, you hear Lynch telling his story. You can almost see him going back to those days of a child, both of them, as they talk about this. Look, many of my colleagues, they're in an income bracket that will never, ever truly understand what it means to be unhoused or underhoused or living, one community to the next. They will never truly understand it. We're going to try with this public housing, though, to make them understand it. We're going to try to continue to speak that truth to power. Again, when they continue to find so much money for resources for their billionaire friends, resources to, again, support defense contractors, again, they can't even pass an audit, I think 7 in a row in the Pentagon budget. But boy, the Williams family having to live in their car to watch 2 of her babies freeze to death, this happened in the richest country in the world. It was shameful that I have to stand here as a member to be proudly supporting this public housing caucus. But it's shameful that we don't understand the consequences of us, again, not doing what we need to do and moving with the urgency that is needed to, again, support public housing. So we'll continue to be on the front line together. We'll continue to bring our stories, continue to, again, bring our districts into the fold. But again, I'm really incredibly proud, again, to be alongside my colleagues that understand the importance of this, but also to that mother. And I say this last because it always makes me cry. She apologized. She kept saying, I'm sorry, I did everything I was supposed to do. I want Miss Williams to know we apologize to you. You have no reason to apologize to us. That's right. I'm sorry that we failed you. And again, we're going to continue to fight on your behalf and so many others. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Representative Tlaib. Thank you. So the voices that I told you we would hear from. So we have 2 residents of public housing, and we will first hear from Joy Johnson. Joy Johnson is the chair of the Public Housing Association of Residents, FAR, in Charlottesville, Virginia. She co-founded this resident-led organization in 1998 and has worked tirelessly. That's the word. Let me just bring her up. Come on up, and she's great. It's your turn. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. Thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Joy Johnson. I usually speak from the heart, and I probably will, but I'm going to read this, and then I'll go to the heart. First, I would like to thank the National Low Income Coalition member of Congress and this public housing caucus. I am a public housing resident. First, and I now work for Charlottesville Redevelopment and Housing Authority in the city of Charlottesville as their resident services coordinator. I'm also the chair of FAR, Public Housing Association of Residents, who we are the duly elected resident organization that works with the housing authority to come up with policies and to be involved in redevelopment. More than ever before, public housing has been a vital part of my journey. Since I have lived in public housing, I have learned how we can come together to bring changes in our community. However, because of Jack Kemp, Hope 6, Choice Neighborhood, Petra, TRA, and RAD, we have lost so many of our public housing that was deeply affordable. And I want the press to research all of these things to see how many public housing have been decimated. And even now, in redeveloping in Charlottesville, we're losing units because and I'm going to read it, but I'm going to tell you it's from the heart, but I'm learned, is that the public housing subsidy is 2 times lower than Section 8 subsidy. Section 8 subsidy is more, but public housing is less. So when you're putting a deal together to redevelop, you cannot get the investment. It doesn't work. So you have to get other funding source to do that. And the public housing stock that is left needs some loving care by bringing in the public housing investment up to the level of Section 8 investment. Public housing protection for our public housing resident is necessary. And it is good to revise policy that does not hurt the housing authorities and their residents. Because see, a lot of time when we revise things, we roll back. We don't enhance so it can become better. More than ever before, our country and the American people needs our government to invest in public housing, which is the only protection and safety net that could ensure American people will have a place to call home. I think I have a few more minutes. Do I? So let me tell you about my journey in becoming a leader around redevelopment. All I wanted to do is to have a welcome wagon for the residents in public housing. But I soon learned just by understanding 24 CFR, working with people like with JR, who's standing back here, being a part of the coalition, really learning that we have to understand what the law says. That's how I was able to hold our housing authority accountable. However, I had to build relationships with them. And so right now, residents, 12 women, research it, 12 women in Charlottesville met 1 year every Sunday to redesign what their community would look like. 12 women. I have to tell you that I didn't think it was going to work. But they fooled me. They were able to understand about zoning. They were able to understand about what is it? That thing you go to City Hall and they have to approve it. Yeah. They had to learn all of that. Critical slopes, roof, sidings, all that stuff. And so I quickly realized, like, oh, I have to really understand how you get affordable housing back in the community, even if we can design them. And so we're doing a public-private partnership in the city of Charlottesville. However, we are still losing units because of the subsidy that I spoke about. And Congressman Meeks mentioned it in a different way. The deal doesn't work, which means if you're only using tax credit, that little sexy name's tax credit, people who makes below $25,000, $30,000 still can't qualify for a tax credit unit. So if you don't have other stream of funding intertwined in it, we can't do it. So, however, we have our executive director, John Sales, and some community people have come together to figure out how to help us fundraise and to make it deeply affordable. So that is part of I could tell you a whole lot more, but I'm going to stop there. We need to preserve the rest of what public housing is left. Because it is the only deeply affordable units right now for poor people. And I mean from 0 to 40,000 a year. So see, all you people that's making 50,000, you think, not me? Well, it's me today and you tomorrow.
Thank you, Miss Joy. Isn't she wonderful? She is wonderful. And so our last speaker for today is Ramona Ferreira. Ramona is the founder of Save Section 9 and is passionate. She's a passionate advocate dedicated to preserving and protecting public housing for future generations. Ramona.
Yeah, Ramona, save Section 9.
Thank you. First, I actually want to take a second to acknowledge the original land stewards of the land that we stand on, because I think public housing is truly a land issue. It's not just a housing issue. And I would disagree with a lot of the speakers that like to focus on the deep affordability and the accumulation of folks of low income within public housing. Public housing is not a program just for those that make less than $50,000 a year. In New York City, where I live, 10% of my neighbors make six figures. Now, I am on public assistance because I am disabled and unable to work. But that 10% provides the buffer for my community to thrive. So I think every single person in America should be applying for public housing, because every single person in America should know what it feels like to have rent that's only 30% of your income. And that's what really provides us with the flexibility and the freedom to make magic, right? So for me, my family has had a relationship with public housing for about 35 years. My grandmother retired and moved into public housing where she got to live her childhood. She left the Dominican Republic due to a dictatorship and facing starvation. And I was the first child in my family to be born in the United States. For 35 years, her home saw every child in my family be born. Her after-school programming, the one that they provided there that I could go to, the senior center, the nourishment, the lunches, the activities, the resources, the benefits and the rights provided by public housing are simply not countered by any other program in America. So when we talk about public housing Section 9, we have to admit to ourselves that at the end of the day, this is a great program. And it was built perfectly. It is probably the best legislation ever written in the United States. But the reason that public housing continues to suffer is because now people that look like me and Joy live there. And that's a hard pill to swallow. It is because Black and brown people make up public housing that we do not fund it. It is because Indigenous people depend on public housing that we do not rehabilitate it and expand it. So I want to ask everyone here today, and I challenge you to actually apply for public housing. Increase the demand. Make the wait list longer. Demonstrate that there is a need for public housing, because the resources and the benefits that I benefit from would make some of you cry. I can spend my afternoons at the senior center or at the community center doing art therapy, doing resource identification, getting help, learning how to crochet, how to make jewelry. The elders, most of them that come to this country and then end up retiring like my grandmother did, never had childhoods. And before my grandmother passed away, one of the things that she told me was that public housing allowed her to live her childhood.
Yes, yes.
And everyone should have that ability, right? Everyone should be able to live in a place where they don't have to fear that their income going up is going to exclude them, where they know that they will always be able to afford the rents, and that freedom will make them bold. So I want to encourage the caucus to be equally bold and to move forward with that spirit, because public housing should be the standard in America. And we've allowed programs like RAD and New York City PAC and Light Tech and all these other things to come in and try to prove to us that the private market can do something about housing. And we know that they will not and cannot, because housing is a human right. So it is upon a caucus like this to actually move that story forward. Thank you.
Yay!
Thank you, Ramona. Thank you so much. And so we're going to close. And in closing, and let me first also to acknowledge, because we do have 3 other representatives, members of Congress who are here with us today. And so I do want to thank Representative Al Green for being here today.
Yeah.
Representative Nakima Williams for being here today. And Representative Troy Carter for being here today as well. Yeah. Thank you so much
Thank you
for your participation. And in closing, I will say, you know, the launch of this caucus is more than symbolic. It's a promise. It's a promise that we will fight for increased funding, for policies that prioritize preservation and expansion, and for a future where public housing is celebrated as a cornerstone of a just and equitable society. And so again, I wish to thank the architects of this caucus, Representative Cleaver, Representative Lynch, Representative Meeks, who was here a little bit earlier, and Representative Torres. Thank you so much for your vision and your leadership. And thank you all for being here as well. And for all the advocates in the audience, thank you for being here and fighting as hard as you do every single day for affordable housing. So appreciate every one of you. Thank you. And thank you for being here.